Here we are in London at 55 Baker Street to take a good look inside a prime of prime brokerage. Alex Lowe, a hedge fund veteran, is managing director of ISAM, which was founded by Lord Stanley Fink here in London. Alex, very nice to see you.
And you, thanks for coming in.
Great pleasure. And what's interesting here specifically is that this company is quite unique in this particular sector in that it has an actual well-established hedge fund behind it that is actually not only one of Britain's most well recognised, but is actually operated and owned by aristocracy. And that's actually backing backing an FX prime of prime brokerage. That's unique.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the aristocracy sort of angle brings to it, but no, there's pedigree. That's for sure is true, and you know, each business brings a significant amount to the other. So you know, what we're trying to do in this business is to broaden it, diversify it across all areas. And so yes, the hedge fund business brings significant pedigree, experience, technical ability, systematic capability to the prime brokerage business, but equally the prime brokerage business brings skills and experience, particularly in areas of execution, markets, etc., that I don't think are that common in the systematic hedge fund space.
I agree, very uncommon. And actually there is an in-house R&D department, which I expect is usually when a prime of prime comes into being, if it's new, and there are only, I've said this many times before, there are only 5 or 6 real prime of primes in this industry worldwide, despite the overuse of the word prime.
Right.
We know that there are only a very few real prime of primes, real tier 1 bank relationships. It's very hard to get those these days and maintain them even.
Yeah.
So to actually establish a prime of prime, the focus is on the relationship, on gaining and maintaining the relationship with the bank.
Yeah.
But there's an R&D aspect too, which would have to be started up from scratch, whereas ISAM already has a well-established R&D. As you touched on the tech aspect, this is very important synergy within this particular industry.
Yeah, we think so. It's become very fashionable that hedge funds describe themselves as technology firms. I think in our case that's always been true. We're relatively new, so our technology is new. It's been built with expansion in mind. And so yeah, when we first talked and thought about the foreign exchange business and developing that, we knew that we had the systematic capabilities, and it comes with quite a big bill, quite a research and development program required to be able to deal with a large number of orders, a large number of tickets, relatively small sizes, and that can be quite complex to process. So you do need a technical offering and ability, and of course the extent to which you get that right for your clients will go a long way to keeping them happy.
Meeting today with Raj Sitlani, who spent many years at Goldman Sachs on the prime brokerage side of the business. So I saw one in China recently, 2-3 months ago.
Yeah.
Went up to one of their members of staff, asked them who their underlying prime relationships were with, and I was told Coinex, XTX Markets, LMAX, some of the tier 1 banks, Saxo Bank. Turns out this is absolutely not the case at all. And of course there's no way of checking. So I was wondering what, as ISPrime is one of, in my opinion, the only genuine prime of prime brokerage in the FX sector in the world. There are 5 or 6 in the world, which you could probably say, Advanced Markets, Invast, Buxton Financial, Saxo Bank, Swissquote. After that, you're starting to struggle as to, there aren't really many more than that.
Sure.
So what do you think of that in terms of something that is, in my opinion, a villain of the piece in the industry?
Well, I think it's inevitable that a smaller brokerage firm in a jurisdiction or in a region like China is going to do everything they can to show some level of credibility about their business. And they're probably not, they're being disingenuous in the sense that they're using names of organizations where they don't have a direct relationship, but there is a likely chance that, or high chance that, their provider does have those connections ultimately to the street.
Yes, that's
so
true.
it's part misleading, part slightly spurious marketing, I would say. But the ultimate way to check is, can they pull the ticket? Can they do an audit trail? And can they go to to the street and verify a trade? And that's something they probably cannot do.
No, I'm sure not.
Whereas amongst the names you've mentioned, ourselves included, it's always been the case and will always be the case that if anyone has any cause to want to question an execution, we will provide them with all of the audit trail on the street side or the bank side execution.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that will contain the name of the LP.
Yes, it will, and that's a complete verification right the way through. But in your case, and in Johnny Brewer, who also established the company 2 years ago alongside you when you joined the company, you're coming from that particular institutional and before that interbank background. So your actual relationships with Goldman Sachs as a tier 1 FX dealer, as well as then several years at Buxton Financial, one of London's most well-known institutional liquidity providers, has stood both of you in the right stead to understand the prime of prime relationships and the prime brokerage of the bank.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's certainly interesting to be on the other side of the fence, as it were. We are buyers of the LP services now, whereby we were the LP. Yes. And I think it does make a difference because it means we have a lot more empathy for the liquidity providers and what they are undergoing when it comes to the sort of flow that we send down. We're there to look after them because we know what it's like to be in their shoes.
Jonathan Brewer is a managing partner of ISPrime, having founded the company alongside former colleague Raj Sitlani. Jonathan, you and I go back a long way, actually.
We do.
This is perhaps me getting older and becoming even more cynical, if that is even imaginable, than I already am. But as the OTC FX industry develops and gets more and more sophisticated and more mature, the age of the very, very well-experienced and highly knowledgeable senior executives in the business has become lower and lower.
Sure.
Gone are the days of the 65, 70-year-old ex-bank executive with everything on paper. It's now a technology-orientated business. And you spent quite a long time at Goldman Sachs and then at Buxton Financial, which is one of London's most well-known liquidity providers for quite some time. And you're still much younger than me.
Although I look older than you. So,
no, you don't. But I think it's interesting from the point of view that this is as far as FX prime of primes go, I was talking to Raj earlier, and we agree that there aren't very many of them in the world, really, that can lay claim to being genuine. You're actually partnering as one of the top ones with a hedge fund. To actually go out and approach a hedge fund and do that must have been quite some interest when you're in your early 30s.
Well, I mean, my role at Goldman's was dealing primarily with hedge funds. So it was already an area of the market or a sort of participant that I was already familiar with. ISAM also was pretty well known to us. They were on the radar when I was in the futures department at Goldman Sachs. So
about 2009, something like that.
So it was 2009 when I left GS. So I mean, the way the initial interaction came about was part chance, part design, and just the more the conversations we had, the more it seemed as though what they were looking to achieve and what we were looking to do were a very good fit. And I'm sure that you've discussed that with Alex already, and so far no regrets. It's gone very well so far.
Andrew is an expert in how liquidity actually is aggregated and distributed and how trades are sent to tier 1 banks and non-bank market makers.
So my general role here is to match the clients with the liquidity that we have. So it's to build relationships with our liquidity providers, be they tier 1 banks, non-bank LPs or ECNs. To then build relationships with the clients and make sure we can match the two together. So the liquidity provision for a retail broker that's trading 30k clips on average is going to be significantly different to the fund that trades 10, 20 mil clips. So it's part of my role, I guess, to make sure we can marry the two together and make sure the pricing is good and also the execution is good. So we can talk, I guess, in detail about the aggregation and about how we actually form the prices. So it's very dependent on the client type and how the client's trading. Generally, we'll have 5 or 6 connections from each of our liquidity providers. We'll build those, which are banks, ECNs, and non-banks as well. Yes. Yeah. So not so much current X, but more the majority of our liquidity providers will be tier 1 banks. And then some of the rising non-bank LPs as well will be in there. So, like that. Just like those guys, yeah. We have quite a selective approach to our liquidity provision. We're not going to just chuck as many LPs into a pool as possible and then get the price out of the aggregation. It's not in our philosophy. I think our philosophy is to deal with as few liquidity providers as we can possibly deal with while giving out the best price possible. So if you put 30 liquidity providers into an aggregation, what comes out, the price may look okay, but when you try to trade on it, if you try to trade simultaneously with 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 liquidity providers, your execution is going to be very poor. Yes, so right. It's really important the way that the liquidity providers interact within the pool as well. So I think it's our philosophy to have risk holding and risk taking LPs, not LPs that will smash out of risk into underlying markets as quick as they possibly can. So some of the high frequency non-banks or some of the other banks who don't hold any risk but just recycle liquidity from others, we have the analytics in place to see that, to find it, and to make sure we get rid of them.
The sales division of an institutional company is the link between the institutional world and the retail world. There are very, very few professionals in this industry who will be privy to such information as Richard, James and Robert here at ISPrime's institutional sales team.
I mean, something that we pride ourselves on is working very, very closely with clients on a day-to-day basis and providing a very, very high-touch service. So it's really about kind of knowing your customer in detail and actually getting an understanding of how they want to be serviced, how they can better service their clients, and really kind of taking as much of the weight off them as possible.
Level of engagement we're having, down to individual trades, down to setup streams, is at a much, much higher level now, and I think that reflects very well in how we work with clients, in that we see ourselves as one of the leaders in the technology that we use, and that very much complements what our clients expect to come from us.
In building that relationship with our clients, we're able to actually work with them, providing a solution that they need, and ultimately ensuring that relationship stays as a relationship that we build upon over time, and that client is actually a quality client for our service, and we become a quality partner likewise for them.
I think the technical aspect is very important, especially when integrating with retail brokerages.
Yeah.
And the different, not every retail brokerage wants to use MT4 and have an off-the-shelf platform.
Right.
Many of the good quality ones today have their own bespoke platform they develop themselves. Because I know companies in London, retail brokerages in London, where it's cost over £100 million to develop an in-house platform for retail traders. So to integrate this and get it right is very, very important to be able to provide direct market access. But that brings me on to another thing. As a hedge fund and as an actual technology provider, being able to do that in-house, multi-asset capability must be something that's on the agenda, I would imagine.
Yes, I mean the way I think about this, and we generally at ISAM think is around diversification. So we start life as a CTA, as a systematic hedge fund business, and diversification is very important from the point of view of investments. But then as you look to grow your business, you need to diversify that business, and to an extent that is much of the reason for the development of the foreign exchange program.
Yeah, I think so.
And then, of course, within that business, what are you going to do? Well, yes, you're going to try and diversify that. So yes, we will look at other asset classes. We have begun an index swap offering, and we'll look to develop that. And of course, there's a risk offering from Grand Rapids from the ISRA acquisition at the beginning of the year. So yes, it's all about increasing the breadth of the product offering and diversifying that business.
That makes sense. Actually, the acquisition of Think Liquidity all the assets of Think Liquidity in Grand Rapids, Michigan last year, embodies that. Actually, I was recent, when that happened, I took the view and actually made it public that it could be the situation now where a brokerage doesn't really need its own dealing desk anymore, because you have now an internal system for everything. If you just want to, let's say a brokerage, you want to concentrate on customer acquisition, customer facing positions and sales, then you could run a brokerage like that and take the entire solution from ISPrime, including the risk management aspect.
Yeah, you could, and I think that's a lot of what we're trying to do, is effectively to systemize, industrialize, whatever the right expression is, that process. We believe in that, right from our core and in the very beginning as hedge fund managers. We use systems, computers, computing power to do things that humans would otherwise be able to do, but with a certain error count. So to systemize it, to make it more efficient, to make it clearer, to make it more robust, those are all the things that we're looking to do. And in many ways, that was one of the reasons that we found Johnny Brewer and Raj Sitlani so workable with. They had a very similar insight into what they wanted to do.
That's right. Actually, Raj, we spoke a few months ago. Just at the time, it's interesting how things come about like this. Just at the time when Think Liquidity's assets were being bought by ISPrime, IS Risk Management's new service, which is now a risk analytics service offered by IS. That now, with that on board, it's almost a sort of holistic system where a broker doesn't really need its own dealing desk. So in a sales, let's say, take Cyprus for example. There's 154 retail brokerages on Cyprus. Most of them are relatively small. There are 4 or 5 large ones, XM, FX Pro, INFX, whether anybody wants to say so or not, is one of the large ones.
Absolutely.
And what Saxo were there, but they've gone now, they've left. That's about it. The rest are small brokerages, retail. So to have a small brokerage sales focus, which is what most of them are, they could probably now get a SISIC license, run a sales team of 10 people or something like that in various languages, not have to do any dealing whatsoever themselves. Take everything, including the risk management, from here.
It's definitely a solution. I think historically money has been made out of the B-book side of the business because clients were probably less sophisticated. Clients have become more sophisticated, and so the smaller brokers simply don't have the analytical capability, tools, resource, physical human beings to analyze flow and deal with it. So that's absolutely right. One of the services that's offered by the guys out in Michigan is to effectively anything from looking at flow, analyzing flow, and advising on how to monetize it, to total outsourced dealing.
How does that work in terms of compliance? Would a brokerage still need to run its own compliance? MiFID 2 is coming up in January 2018 and be fully implemented. Each systematic internalizer, they call it, which is B-book brokerage, will have to report all of its trade activity to the European authorities.
Absolutely right.
Does this take that away from that responsibility away and actually allow ISPrime to do that, to report it to the FCA instead, or will they still have to do it on both sides?
I don't think it will be down to ISPrime. I mean, one of the services that's offered by ISRA, IS Risk Analytics in Michigan, is to do the EMEA reporting and to do the trade reporting directly for the client. So we at ISPrime are not involved in that process.
Right. So that's actually another aspect that can be taken of resource-hungry aspect that can be taken away from a broker.
Delegated reporting is very much one of the services on offer.
Very interesting indeed. And there must be some science involved in the actual keeping a homogeneous system which has tier 1 banks and non-bank, because the tier 1 banks, at the moment, the way things work at the moment is that the tier 1 banks are very careful about who they extend liquidity to, but once they've done once they're satisfied that there's enough of the criteria met and there's a good relationship built up, they will execute all of the trades. They will not unless they use it. Okay, there's a lot of discourse about last look execution, but it's small, and it is a problem. I also personally don't like it because I think it's a one-way street, but it's a small number of trades. However, the non-bank market makers are often very keen to give excellent spreads, no rejections, no last look. That doesn't really exist in that world, but the fill rate is much less. So balancing that is quite a science, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And we, going back to the LPs that we choose to go into aggregation, it's very much a data-driven approach to how we look at those LPs. And so we measure them based on the amount of volume that they take from us, from the aggregated book. So are they the top volume LP? Are they managing to price correctly to get the maximum number of trades from us? What's the US dollar cost of rejection? So that's the big one. So you can combine hold times and fill ratios into pretty much a US dollar cost of rejection kind of covers those two. So what I mean by that is we look at the actual cost of a rejection. So if we were rejected at one price and we had to fill at the worst price, that's cost us a certain amount of money.
So you were doing in-house?
Yes.
I see, that makes perfect sense. So this stops the dichotomy between the tier 1 bank's execution policy and that of Hotspot or XTX or one of the market makers.
So it's a way to compare no last look to last look feeds. So I think the last look going back 3-4 years was a pretty horrible practice.
It was indeed, I agree.
I think it was particularly horrible with LPs who were last looking, rejecting, but then using the order information to trade themselves.
It's incredible. If you did that, you'd be in very serious trouble.
Oh, it's outrageous. It really is outrageous.
That's why I think it is outrageous. You know, if you're, in fact, the further down the chain it is, the worse. If a retail brokerage did it, there'd be an enormous. It would be all over the news.
Yeah.
There would be all of the forex industry portals would report it. It'd be all over mainstream Financial Times. The FCA would go nuts, or the ASIC, whichever jurisdiction, they would go nuts, and they'd be in big trouble for that, and potentially a criminal action against the owners.
Yeah.
But that is normal practice on single dealer platforms.
Yeah, and in particular non-bank LPs who are, I don't think it happens so much now.
Much less, but it's still there.
Yeah, it can still be there. I think the last look as well, and the taking advantage of the last look by hanging on to it for too long is certainly there still.